All right, we're gonna jump into a sketch and make a solid shape. So sketch, I'm gonna choose the front plane and I'm gonna rotate so that I'm looking straight at the front plane by pressing N on my keyboard or clicking on the front face of the view cube. This dialog box is not in the best location, so I'm gonna kind of scoot it off to the side somewhere, okay? All right, now, just a friendly reminder, when we create geometry, I want my sketch to, in the end, be fully constrained. That means constrained to be in a certain shape, a certain size, and a certain location. So we don't want this to be able to change shape. Right now, it may not be able to change shape. It may be stuck at a shape, which really what's controlling the shape is the fact that I have a bunch of vertical and horizontal, perpendicular lines, horizontal and verticals. And so it kind of has to stay the same shape where I've got all these right angles, but the dimensions can change. So maybe proportionally it doesn't keep the same ratios of how tall a part is relative to the overall height or how wide, etc. But it's kind of the same shape, if you know what I mean. All right. So by just making some lines, and as I was carefully making them, if I am intentionally clicking, getting those auto constraints of vertical, like you see on the screen right there, with that little vertical black line, here I'm getting a horizontal constraint, right? Then those lines have to be perpendicular. So as I click around, right, if I'm intentionally doing that, I may even get constraints as in 2 points that have to remain horizontal or vertical from one another. Okay, so this point right here has to stay aligned to that point. If I click right here where I'm getting that dashed orange line, and so moving across, right, this has to now showing perpendicular to the previous, so kind of the same as horizontal. So it's creating these auto constraints based on where I have my mouse, which I'm fine with. These are my shape that I want to create is going to have these right angles, okay? So hopefully that makes sense that I've created a little closed area where basically I've constrained a shape, just not a size. So to start to constrain dimension sizes, we use the dimensional constraint, okay? Good to know, the very first dimension you apply to a sketch, if you haven't dimensioned anything, okay, will scale the entire sketch proportionally up or down. So if I'm going to make this 2.25, the shape should stay proportionally the same. So I'm going to apply kind of an overall dimension here that I know. And I know the width here is going to be 2.25. Basically, I'm making a little T shape, right, out of those linking cubes where I've got 3 across the top and then kind of a height of 3 of them where there's 2 here. Okay, so within the overall heights, now I can dimension, there's kind of 2 segments here together, height-wise, that make up the overall height. And so they don't really know, let me turn that off, they don't really know if they're supposed to be equal to each other. They just know that they have to add up to 2.25. So if I drag this down, right, the very top and very bottom is not moving, the height's not going to change, okay? But they don't know if it should be 1 and 1.25 or etc. So I'm going to turn on the dimension tool and click this little segment, and I want this to be the distance of 1 block, which is 0.75, and then that should automatically make this be the rest, the difference between 2.25 and 0.75. Okay, and then width-wise, going across the side, this is supposed to be 1 block wide, so let's add a dimension on that. And one way to do it is click this segment, right? That would get that width, or I could click these 2 lines if I wanted to find the width between them, right? Same thing. So that's 0.75, kind of 1 block's width. Now, even though I've got the width of that block, it doesn't really know where it's supposed to be. It could be, right, could it be closer to the left? Could it be closer to the right? It doesn't really know that it has to be centered. And there's different ways to do that. We know we want it to be centered where it's kind of 0.75, 0.75, 0.75. Well, we already have constrained the overall width. So if we get one of these constrained, then the extra is over here. And so 1 block of width right here being 0.75 would basically be the length we need for this line segment, or the distance from this line segment to this line segment. Both are going to give us the exact same result, so it really doesn't matter where you click, here or here and here. It's just if you use these 2, you have to make 2 selections. So right now it's 0.770416, whatever, right? It's kind of had freedom to move. We're going to constrain it to being exactly 0.75, and there you go. At this point, this shape is constrained both by shape and size. However, it's not constrained by location. It has the freedom to float in space, and we don't want that. We want our sketches to be fully constrained. Let me get rid of this extra geometry. So we have 2 options. One, if the origin, we're doing a new sketch and there's really no reason why we can't use the origin is right there and is a very logical place to anchor your sketch. That point doesn't move in space, okay? It's anchored at the intersection of the X, Y, and Z axes. So we can get one of these points to be coincident to the origin by turning on the coincident constraint and then selecting the 2 points that we want to be in the same location. Or we can simply drag, okay, if that tool's off, you can actually drag 1 point over onto the origin. I'm holding down my mouse button, and then when the origin lights up orange and the little coincident constraint shows, I can let go, and it does the exact same thing. Notice the sketch went from blue to black. Okay, now if your sketch maybe was already constrained a little bit, but not fully, right? Like if I had a horizontal constraint between a point and the origin, then I'm going to have a mix of orange, or I said orange, blue and black lines, because this thing can move one way, but it can't move the other. So it can't move up and down, but it can move side to side. So these black lines are kind of like, hey, I can't go up and down. Like the line, I know you see the line segments moving left and right, but they're kind of part of lines that keep going, and so those lines can't move up or down. They're kind of stuck. They can't change angles, so they feel like I'm directionally kind of stuck. All right, and the same thing would have happened if maybe a point was vertically aligned to the origin, okay? You still have a mix of some black lines and some blue lines. What we want is all black, fully constrained. And so you can do that by latching onto the origin. Now, what if your sketch has some reason why you are not going to use the origin? Okay, then what do you do? Well, then we use a tool called Fix. And I know where it is, but just to highlight it for you, if I type in Fix in the search tool, you can see it's like a horizontal line with these little diagonals coming off the bottom, and that's supposed to kind of look like a surface, like a ground. But basically, we want to fix or anchor a piece of geometry. You should be using Fix very carefully. Fix should only be on one thing in a sketch, and only if we haven't already anchored to something else. And the only thing I generally would fix, usually, is a single point. Okay, so I'm going to fix a single corner. Having a system to how you do that, like always using the lower left corner or always upper right corner or something, would be helpful for you just to kind of find those fixed points later if they're ever causing you trouble. Fixing too many pieces of geometry is usually a bad thing. Here I added a second fix, and you can see I got a red error. It doesn't like that. It's kind of grumpy and mad at me. So I'm going to delete that second fix. But showing constraints, just if you kind of have a habit of going to the same area of a sketch, then it's easier to find if you ever need to delete it and adjust things. Okay, so there is a sketch. All right, next up is just a flat 2D sketch. It was fully constrained. We are going to extrude it. I'm going to extrude this to the depth of 1 block, which is 0.75, and accept. And now the shape that I wanted to create actually has an extra block down here at the bottom. So I'm going to start a new sketch. This time, we're not going to use one of the 3 original planes, front, top, or right. We are allowed to sketch on a surface. And now we have all these other surfaces now that we've given ourselves a solid. So we can choose any of these surfaces as long as they're actually truly a flat surface, a plane. It won't let you select for a sketch anything that has a curve to it. And so I'm going to choose this front face. And so now you can see where the sketch plane is if I rotate, right, that it's right on that face. And we are going to use the corner rectangle tool. Okay, I want this rectangle to sit perfectly with the bottom left corner lined up to that corner, and then I need a corner over here that can float. It needs to be on the edge, but I'm going to have to dimension where it is height-wise, okay? So I'm going to get a coincident constraint right here to start, and then I'm going to move my mouse until I'm on this edge, and I'll get a coincident constraint for this corner to a line, but not to like a specific point, okay? I'm going to click, and it's asking me if I want to type in a dimension. I'm going to go ahead and hit escape, because here's the thing. I've actually already dimensioned the width. Notice that this line on the right edge is black. this point is already stuck on the right edge, and this point is stuck down in that corner. So it has to be 0.75. If I give it this 0.75 dimension again, it doesn't like that. So if I hit enter, that would accept it, and look, it turns red and gets angry. Basically, it's kind of like, I already am 0.75. Like, why are you telling me to be the same thing? It's like when your parents tell you to clean your room again and again and again. You're like, stop telling me, I already know, I'm going to do it. Although, hey, in friendly advice, don't make them ever say it twice. The first time they tell you, just go do it right away. Like, drop everything and do it. Okay, I do need to dimension the height, though. All right, so I don't need to dimension the width. That was already done using quincent constraints. But the height, it needs to know that the distance between those has to be 0.75. All right, that's it. That is a fully constrained sketch. Okay, it's a rectangle by shape. It's been dimensioned by size. One dimension width was using quincent constraints. The other dimension height here is using a dimensional constraint, and the location is fixed at that corner. So it's anchored at that corner, and so we're going to accept that sketch, and now we're going to extrude again. When you go to extrude, you have this little extrude menu, and it defaulted to add, which is good, it's what I want, but you need to realize that there is both the option to add on to a part or to make a new part. So just because that sketch starts on the face of another part doesn't mean that it has to become one and become part of that. So Onshape gives you the option for that to be a new piece. Notice down here in the Part Studio it shows Part 2. If I put it on Add, it just shows one part, and it's expecting all of this to be one part. It's automatically kind of figuring out that the merge scope, like what it's going to merge and add on to, is this piece. Granted, that's the only thing that's there. But sometimes when we are using Onshape and based on what's around it, sometimes it doesn't know what it should add on to, okay? So sometimes when we're on add, it's red because it's like, I don't know what to add on to, and you have to see that the merge scope is blank. So you click on that merge scope, just kind of make sure Onshape knows that's the item, that's the menu item I'm trying to work on right now, and then you go click on the part that you want to add on to. You can either click on it in the graphic window or you can click on it in the part name. It'll then populate, maybe, there you go. It'll populate that menu, part 1, and then graphically it should look more correct. It should blend the color, it should not be red anymore, and so we have it on add. I also need to make sure the depth is right, which is going to be the length of those plastic linking cubes is 0.75, and there you go. Okay, I'm going to accept that, and that is our first little shape from those linking cubes. If you'd like to change the name by chance, you can right click on the part and you can give it a name, like T-shape, I don't know, whatever you want to give it. So my first shape. Okay, and then you can right click on that, and you can also, this is another thing, edit appearance, where you can give it a color that you'd like. What else can you do? You can right click, you can assign it a material. Right now it's just kind of a generic material, and so there is an Onshape material library that's already selected. You can click this drop down and you can pick a material like stainless steel right there. You can scroll down a little bit. ABS is a type of plastic that gets used commonly. I don't know if it has PLA. PLA is the plastic that we use. I don't know I should know the name of PLA, but anyway, we go ABS and hit accept. The benefit, okay, of having a material is that there is a little scale-looking icon down here, and that gives you a mass properties menu where you can choose a part. So right now it just says part to measure. It's not selected. If I select it, it says, all right, here's the name of the part you selected, and it'll give you physical properties without ever having physically held this object. So things like, what's the mass of this going to be? What's the volume? What's the surface area? What is the center of mass? The center of mass is this little icon right here. This little circle with kind of the black and white sectors. And so that is telling you where basically the center of gravity, center mass is, if you want to balance it. So that can be a really important kind of physical point to know geometrically on an object where your center mass is. So very cool that it can calculate a lot of things for you and just kind of spit it out and give it to you. So there you go, first shape, and hopefully you've learned some good basic foundational things.